Hello and welcome to English for You. I'm Seb.
And I'm Mike.
And today we are talking all about the great outdoors, or actually more about animals, really, aren't we? We're talking about animals.
Ooh, okay. What kind of animals? Any special animals that we're looking at this month?
Some very special animals, actually. We're talking about the red panda. Have you ever seen a red panda before?
I know what it looks like, but I can't actually remember seeing one in real life. I don't think I've ever met a red panda, but I am aware of the red panda. I think I'm aware enough to know that it's not a panda.
It's not in the same family as a panda, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that more.
That's about all I know about red pandas
Yes.
right there. So good.
I remember the first time I saw a red panda, I thought I was expecting to see like a giant panda, you know, like a black and white panda,
a
but
bear-like
maybe
animal.
It's red and black, or it's white and red, you know. That's what I was expecting. But no, they're quite different.
Yeah, they are.
Yes, I think they look a lot like raccoons. But anyway, I feel like we're getting too far into the article right now. So let's just get started and let's meet Rufus, the red panda.
Reading.
The Red Panda Factfile.
Hello, I'm Rufus and I'm a red panda, one of the cutest critters in the animal kingdom. I live in a zoo and I receive a lot of questions in the mail. The zoo has asked me to reply to some common ones.
Are you really a panda?
Of course, but red pandas aren't closely related to giant pandas at all. In fact, we're closer to seals than giant pandas. Actually, our closest relatives are raccoons and weasels.
Why do people call you a panda?
Western scientists first formally described us in 1825. The word panda likely comes from Nepal, where many of us live. We were simply called pandas until Westerners found giant pandas years later. Then, our names got changed by adding red.
Where do you live?
We're located in Southeast Asia, from China to Western Nepal. We live in forests around 2,200 to 4,800 meters above sea level, and we like to live close to water. We're most active around dawn and dusk. We're hard to see in the wild, though.
Okay, so our article begins, Hello, I'm Rufus and I'm a red panda, one of the cutest critters in the animal kingdom. Right, so a critter, that is basically a cute word for an animal, basically. I always think of critters as small animals, normally. You know, like mice or cats or dogs. Actually, well, it has to be a wild animal, doesn't it? You don't talk about your pet as a critter.
And I almost might think of like lizards or things you might find living around your house as a critter too, but in an unwanted kind of way.
Right. For me, maybe this is a British thing, but for me, I think that critter sounds a bit more positive, while vermin is the word I would use for small animals that I don't want around. You know, like rats, cockroaches, like nasty animals like that.
Definitely.
So Rufus is a red panda. He's one of the cutest critters in the animal kingdom. And the animal kingdom is just a word that we use to mean all of the animals in the world, basically.
Okay. As we read on, it says, this is Rufus, the red panda, who can apparently speak English quite well, which is nice.
Great skill.
I live in a zoo, and I receive a lot of questions in the mail. Well, he can read, he can write letters, and now we know where to find him. He lives in a zoo, as do many of the wild animals that we get a chance to see up close and personal. Of course, you can see them out in the wild, in nature, but most of us living in a city don't get those chances, so the zoo is a good place to go. And I guess people write letters to the animals in the zoo. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it seems like a cool way to learn more about the animals there. So he says,
The zoo has asked me to reply to some common ones.
Now, reply means to respond to something, answer a question or give an answer. So, basically anything that one person says to another, the thing they say back is a reply. It's responding. So the panda is answering your questions. And here we've got an example sentence. James replied to the wave with a cheery good morning. So here he's responding not to something spoken, but just he's noticed something and he's saying something back to the person who did it. Reply can also be a noun as well, so we could also give a reply instead of reply. And we can also modify that in many different ways. We can talk about a cold reply, which is a reply that's not very polite or not very friendly, quite distant, or a warm reply, which is quite nice, quite friendly, quite happy.
Absolutely. So let's listen to some of the questions and then check out some of the replies from our friend Rufus the Red Panda. Now, the first question is probably written in by a Red Panda fan or maybe a student who's doing a project on red pandas and needs good information. And so the question is, a really good one, are you really a panda? Well, that's a really good question because, of course, as you mentioned, giant pandas, the black and white bears from China, we think of those as pandas. This red panda, you can see it in a picture, looks quite different. So I think that's a pretty safe question. Are you really a panda? Because, in nature, there are these animals that look similar, but then we find out that they're not really of the same type. A lot of people before they know might say dolphins are fish. But of course, we know dolphins aren't fish. So sometimes what we see and what science says can be a little different. So, are you really a panda is the question.
Well, Rufus says, of course, but red pandas aren't closely related to giant pandas at all. Okay, so as we said, the giant panda, that is the big black and white bear, and they are in a different family. Obviously, a giant panda is a bear. It's similar to brown bears, black bears, polar bears, but a red panda isn't that similar at all. It's more closely related to other animals. Now, related basically means to be connected, right?
Absolutely. If something is related to something, there is a connection there, a real connection. You can, of course, talk about being related to all of your family members, right? You all have a common grandparent going back generations, so you're related. You could also be related to people by saying, I went to the same school as that person, we played on the same baseball team. There's some kind of connection there. But often when we use this, we are talking about some kind of family, blood, genetic, DNA connection. That's why we would generally use this term for family members or things like that. But in science, of course, when we're talking about animal families, we could also use this term to talk about them having a connection in science. For example, most big cats, like lions and tigers, are related to each other. That's right. There's a connection there. They're very close, kind of cousins, I guess you could say. But of course, cousins, like in a family, are also related.
Exactly. And Rufus adds, in fact, we're closer to seals than giant pandas. That's interesting. I never thought of red pandas and seals being similar.
No, and they don't go ar, and ask for fish. So that's kind of what I think seals do. Because, seals are large sea animals like dolphins and whales. They breathe air, so they're not sort of fish in the way that we think of fish being able to breathe underwater. Seals are mammals. They're warm-blooded, air-breathing and live baby-having mammals, just like we are. But we often see seals in areas near the coast, near where the land and the water meet. You might see some seals over there. They, of course, live up near the North Pole, down near the South Pole, around many of the coasts of a lot of the big countries and oceans. These are ocean animals, so you won't find seals in rivers and lakes. You'll find them in seals and oceans. For example, if you really want to see some seals, you can see seals in downtown San Francisco at Fisherman's Wharf.
So they're similar to seals, these red pandas, but he says, actually, our closest relatives are raccoons and weasels. See, I see that connection. with raccoons, especially. When I see a red panda, for me, looks a lot like a raccoon.
Definitely, it looks a lot like a raccoon, yes. Raccoons, of course, are a North American mammal. They're quite famous for having a brown face but a black mask around their eyes. There's black fur, and they have kind of a white and black banded tail, I believe. Raccoons are very smart creatures, actually. They live in the cities, they live in the countries. I've seen a few raccoons around my mother's house in Vancouver, and if you ever live in a place like Vancouver where they have raccoons, you know that people spend a lot of time keeping their garbage safe and secure because raccoons are incredibly smart and also like human garbage. So if you don't lock down your garbage cans at night or put them inside somewhere, the raccoons can get in there. And they're quite cute, but they can be a little dangerous. It's best to stay away from raccoons.
We also saw weasels as well. So weasels are in North America, aren't they?
Weasels, ferrets, things like that. They're all quite similar. They're sort of small, cat-like, short legs. Long
bodies.
Long bodies. Some people keep them as pets, but I think they're more commonly thought of as wild creatures. And weasels are also quite smart. They're good at digging holes, and they eat birds' eggs, small animals, things like that. So, yeah, I can see the connection between raccoons and weasels. The other thing, of course, raccoons, weasels, red pandas, these are some of the older mammals that are still around. I mean, a lot of these mammals probably go back to the time just after the dinosaurs, whereas, of course, humans and cats and other mammals came along much, much later. So, see, these are some of the ancient mammal survivors of long ago history.
Yes, and I think the interesting thing about them is they often have, I think they have thumbs, don't they? Or they have little people-like hands, which is kind of a cute thing about raccoons and red pandas.
Good at climbing and opening garbage cans.
Exactly. So the next question for Rufus is, why do people call you a panda? And Rufus responds, Western scientists first formally described us in 1825. So I think he's getting into the reason why they're called a panda. And he begins by explaining that they got the name from Western scientists. Now, Western is a bit of a silly word, I think. Generally, it means the side of the Earth or the direction where the sun sets, basically. So if you go west of Taiwan, you will end up in China.
Right.
But when we're using it to describe people or countries or cultures, we generally mean countries that are in Europe or North America. But it could also be South Africa.
True.
And it could also be Australia, which are places that are not really so west of Taiwan.
Right. But
South Africa is more south.
It's sort of southeast or something like that. But they do speak English. Yes, they do have a lot of family ties to countries in Europe and North America too. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. So a example sentence we could use for Western is, some Western desserts like chocolate cake and pecan pie are too sweet for Asian tastes. Right. I think especially in Taiwan, in Japan, Korea, when people use Western, they really mean North American or European.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Exactly.
Anyway, so Western scientists gave them the name.
All right. They described them or sort of, studied them in a scientific way back in 1825. Some of the first explorers, scientists taking collections and drawing pictures. So where did the name actually come from? Well, it says the word panda likely comes from Nepal, where many of us live. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So this word panda that we use, of course, for not just the red panda, but other types, comes from Nepal. This is a country in the Himalaya mountains, in those big mountains between China and India. If you're climbing Mount Everest, you might go to Nepal. And many of us, many red pandas live there, so it might have been a local word. And when the scientists, the Western scientists were there and they pointed at this strange new animal, maybe the local people said, oh, it's a panda. That was their name for it. Maybe those local people didn't even know about the giant black and white panda from China. It was just a name they used for sort of a bear-like creature. At least that's where the name comes from. When we talk about something coming from a place, we're saying basically that's where it originates, that's where it was born, that's where it was first created or seen or something like that. You might say rock and roll comes from the southern states of the U.S. You might say, classical music comes from Europe. And of course, you can also use this with people, right? You can say Michael Jordan comes from the U.S. state of North Carolina. That's where he was born. And of course, things change, they spread, they travel, they go other places. But if you go back to the beginning, where something originated or was created, that's where it comes from.
Exactly. And we also have a grammar point in this sentence as well. The word panda likely comes from Nepal, where many of us live. Now, where here is introducing an independent clause, which is basically fancy language for additional information in the sentence that isn't needed for it to make sense, but it does add interesting details. So we could actually say this as two sentences. We could say, the word panda likely comes from Nepal. Many of us live in Nepal. But if we want to make it more interesting, we want to connect it together, we can use this word where. Now, the one thing you want to remember is that the first verb or the main verb in your second phrase, your second clause, has to agree with the object. So, if it's a plural object, then you need a plural verb. If it's a singular object, then you need a singular verb. So that's enough grammar for now. Let's move on to the next sentence. So Rufus continues, we were simply called pandas until Westerners found giant pandas years later. Wow, I always imagined that we've known about pandas for a long time.
Yeah,
I can't believe
Right.
Western scientists only found them in the 19th century.
Exactly. But when you learn that they come from Nepal, which is a very remote country, very hard to get to country, now it kind of makes sense. They've been hiding up in the giant Himalayan mountains for millions and millions of years until people finally came along to bother them. That would be Rufus's great-great-grandparents. Exactly. Yes, of course. So these Westerners, and we can use that term Westerner, basically to talk about someone from a Western country. Remember, we said North America, European countries. These are often called Western countries. So a person from that part of the world, or maybe even just a person who looks like they're from that part of the world, you might normally call that person a Westerner. And so they found these pandas up there in Nepal, in the Himalayan mountains. And then it says, then our names got changed by adding red. So when they finally got into China, these scientists said, hey, there's another animal that looks kind of like a panda, but it looks like a real panda, or they obviously look different.
A very big one.
A very big one, different colors, kind of a different look in many ways. I think giant pandas have a very short tail, for example, quite obvious differences. So they had to kind of come up with a way of differentiating or telling the difference between these two pandas. So the red panda has the red hair, and the other one, which was bigger, I believe that the formal term is giant panda, right? For the ones from China. So that way, people know which one you're talking about.
So our next question for Rufus is, where do you live? So where does Rufus live?
And notice Rufus doesn't say, I live in a zoo, of course. No, because the question isn't really about where do you, Rufus, live.
No, where are red pandas from?
Exactly. If we want to find them in the wild, which part of the world would we go to? And as we know, we're located, he says, in Southeast Asia, from China to Western Nepal. Yeah, so these are definitely an Asian animal, maybe even an East Asian animal, you might almost say. So that's the part of the world. You won't find them in the Amazon. You won't find them in the Rocky Mountains of North America. They're in Southeast Asia, from China to Western Nepal. So sort of the mountainous, the areas with mountains in Asia, not living in like the jungles of Vietnam or something. This is where they're located. Where something is found is where it's located. You can use this term basically to say, where is something? Where is it located? You want to know its location, right? That's the other word that we use with a similar sound. For example, my grandmother's house is located in Hsinchu. I could say my grandmother lives in Hsinchu, or my grandmother's house is in Hsinchu, but saying it's located there is even more precise.
Exactly. It's where it is.
Yeah.
So let's learn more about where Rufus's people are from. We live in forests around 2,200 to 4,800 meters above sea level. And we like to live close to water. Okay, so they probably live close to streams, maybe ponds, maybe lakes. And Rufus adds, we're most active around dawn and dusk. So dawn is basically the time just before and around the sun rises. Okay, I always think of dawn as being just before the sun rises. So the sky is starting to get light. There's maybe a lot of pink in the sky, maybe some red. The sun is about to come over the horizon. We're about to have sunrise, which is 日出. So yeah, basically that's when the red pandas are probably most active, when they're running around, they're getting their food, they are going down to get water from the stream. And we've got an example sentence for dawn here. We had to get up before dawn to make our 6 a.m. flight. Okay, so we had to get up really early. We had to get up while it was still dark. Now, the opposite of dawn is the other important word in our sentence, dusk. Now, dusk is the time around sunset. It's the opposite of dawn. And again, I would think of this normally after the sun has actually disappeared behind the horizon. Dusk is when the sky is getting orange, it's getting dark, it's the opposite of dawn. And after dusk, we actually have another phase which is called twilight, and that's the earliest part of the night when it's dark outside, but you could still probably walk around the countryside without a torch at this point.
And that's when the vampires come out,
When the
right?
vampires come
Twilight,
out,
yeah,
yes.
obviously. And then as we finish the article, Rufus tells us, we're hard to see in the wild, though. Well, yeah, if they're getting active, if they're doing a lot of their busy work around dawn and dusk, it would be kind of hard to see them. Plus, of course, they have that wonderful coloring on their fur that probably makes it very easy for them to hide in trees and bushes and things like that. The other thing we learned from this is if you're a big red panda fan and you're saying, I'm going to go to Nepal next year to see red pandas in the wild, I would have to say to you now, well, good luck, because they're hard to see in the wild. So maybe seeing one in your local zoo would be the wisest move. All right, that's all the time we have for today, but we do have a chat, so we're going to take a break and then come back for that.
For You Chat.
All right, so our chat question is about which one of these animals, not as stronger, not as faster, not as more dangerous, which are cuter, red pandas or giant pandas? Give reasons for your answer.
That's a really tough question.
It is.
I think in a still picture, I think that red pandas are cuter.
Okay.
But I think overall the winner is the giant panda.
Oh, they do kind of roll down the hill like giant babies, don't they?
When they fall over. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of pandas in the zoos trying to get, snacks from like high up places or climb up on like the jungle gyms and falling off. That is very cute.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. So they're definitely cute. I don't know. Maybe I'd have to give red pandas a vote here just because I haven't seen them as much. So maybe I'd like to see them try to be as... We should have a cute competition between red and giant pandas, and then we can give them some kind of prize at the end or something like that.
Let's push them both over and see how they fall.
Okay, I think I like that idea. That's a pretty good one. But of course on something soft.
On something soft.
Something
yeah,
soft,
of course. They won't be hurt.
Have them jump around on mattresses and see which one's cuter.
All right, so we're going to go away and do that now, and we will join you tomorrow when we'll be continuing to learn all about Rufus and red pandas. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Vocabulary Review.
Reply. Dan still hasn't replied to my message. I sent it 2 days ago. Related. Although they aren't the same, the English and German languages are actually related. Seal. Sarah likes to swim in the sea. Sometimes she spots a seal's head appearing above the waves. Western. Most European countries are considered Western, but some, such as Turkey, are not. Locate. Locate. Our office is located very close to the station, so you'll only need to walk for about 5 minutes. Dawn. Amy likes to get up at dawn. Waking up early gives her time to exercise before work.
智慧小补帖
Critter. Raccoon. Weasel. Dusk.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net。 www.english4u.net